it is not, generally speaking, unruly.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protesters.
Peaceful protest.
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 Good evening. I'm Robert Crescione, and you've tuned in to America in Danger. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Today is the 10th of April, 2021. A lot going on in this country, a lot going on around the world. And we're going to talk about a few things. You know, the intro to the show there focuses a lot on the media and their spin and their story and their narrative. Well, I want to start out talking about that a little bit tonight, because we know that the media is not really trustworthy. They tend to embellish, they tend to fabricate, they tend to spin, they tend to create a narrative pushing their agenda, or part of an agenda, not necessarily their agenda, but an agenda nonetheless. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and after that we're going to move into government lies and deceptions. But you know, we want to start with the media because everyone sees the media every day. So I want to just point out a few things where the media has been caught red-handed in a lie. And I think some of you will probably remember these, you know. In 1981, there was a reporter, Janet Cook. Well, she fabricated a story about an 8-year-old heroin addict. She won the Pulitzer Prize for that article. It was completely fabricated. Later it was found out, and she was stripped of her Pulitzer Prize. In 1986, if you remember the show 60 Minutes, still going strong, 60 Minutes is, but CBS rigged an Audi 5000 to appear that it moved on its own. If you remember the issues that they were having with the Audi supposedly taking off on its own and suddenly accelerating and causing crashes and what have you. It was later found that it was typically because of the pedals being so close together, people stepped on the accelerator thinking it was the brake. And of course, what you're going to do when you think you're on the brake and you're still moving, you're going to push it harder. So that ended up being the gist of that one. In 1992, you might remember this one, Dateline. That show is still going strong too. They rigged a Chevrolet truck to explode on impact or catch fire on impact because they were saying that the Chevy trucks were prone to do that. Well, they were caught planting incendiary devices on the vehicle so that it for sure caught fire when it was impacted. In 1996, and I remember this one well, there were individuals that went into Food Lion and staged numerous mischievous events so that they could be secretly filmed to put a negative connotation on Food Lion. They were hired in, they were plants, they weren't regular employees, so Food Lion, that hurt Food Lion a good bit at that time. And in 2012, if you remember, NBC edited the 9/11 calls from George Zimmerman to make him sound racist. That's not the first time they've done things like that. And here recently, just the other day, 60 Minutes again edited their interview with Ron DeSantis to make it look like he had paid off Publix for campaign support. The reality of it was, the deal wasn't his to determine. It was determined by other people. And Publix is a large grocery store in Florida. And CBS, of course, came back and they said, well, we edited the interview for clarity. Whose clarity? That's the question. Whose clarity were they talking about? Were they talking about clarity for Governor DeSantis, or were they talking about clarity for their own narrative? I think it was clarity for their own narrative myself. But, you know, the list goes on, and that's just a few. That's just a few of the biggies. You know, I've seen reports and knew for a fact that that wasn't the way things happened. You know, we see reports every day, and it's not always the way things happen. So anytime you hear something in the media, it pays if we investigate that for ourselves. Don't take their word for it. Look into it yourself. With the internet, with being able to do searches and what have you online, it's a lot easier to find that information. Although we have big tech today trying to censor, trying to control the flow of information, trying to create their own narrative so that you're denied the ability to find out the truth. Facebook is a big one on that. They censor everything and then they put their fact checkers on it. Well, it was interesting because we know that President Biden recently at a press conference where he decided, or he announced rather, that he's going to implement some gun control measures because Congress won't. Now, if you're a shooter or own guns, this affects you. You know, a lot of people say, oh, well, it's not going to affect me because I don't have any need for 30-round mags. I don't have any need for this. I don't have a need for a pistol or anything like that. But it affects all of us because it's an assault on the Second Amendment. Now, I want to show you a little clip with President Biden. And Lee, if you'll cue that up, take a look at this and we'll be back when it's over.
Today we're taking steps to confront not just the gun crisis, but what is actually a public health crisis. Nothing I'm about to recommend in any way impinges on the Second Amendment. They're phony arguments suggesting that these are Second Amendment rights at stake in what we're talking about. But no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. It's called a freedom of speech. From the very beginning, you couldn't own any weapon you wanted to own. From the very beginning the Second Amendment existed, certain people weren't allowed to have weapons. So the idea is just bizarre to suggest that some of the things we're recommending are contrary to the Constitution. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic.
About a minute and a quarter of his press conference. And in that, he told 4 lies, cast aspersions at members of society, and basically engaged in fear-mongering. So, you know, I don't, first of all, the lies that he told, and one of my personal favorites is the gun show loophole lie. And that one's told often. Newspapers use it, the media uses it, the president uses it, and all gun control advocates use it. They say, oh, you can go to a gun show and you can buy anything you want. Well, this is not true. This is not true because under the laws of this nation, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms says that if you are a federal firearm licensee and you engage in the selling of firearms, that you will perform a background check regardless of how you sell that firearm. You still have to submit a NICS check. That's the National Instant Criminal Database. It only takes a few minutes. You plug the information in, and typically you get a response in less than 30 seconds. It's fairly efficient. However, sometimes because of confusion between names, confusion with identifiers, you might get a delay. Now, President Biden said that after 3 days, the dealer can sell you that firearm if they haven't heard back from the ATF. And this is true. That's absolutely true. But what ATF will do, or the FBI, actually, the FBI runs the NICS. What the FBI will do is say, no, you cannot sell this firearm, if there's even a question about the individual. If there's nothing that they find with these confused names or any of that, then they sell it. They're fine with it. But you cannot buy anything you want at a gun show. Now, what many people mistake for this gun show loophole is the fact that as an individual, you can sell anyone else a firearm. That's your right. That's legal. Now, the gun control measures being pushed by the president will seek to eliminate that, and that's why they keep talking about universal background checks. Universal background checks will require you as an individual to perform or have performed or go through a licensed federal firearm dealer if you want to sell a firearm to your buddy. That's right. If you want to sell a firearm to your buddy, you'll have to go through that whole process. Now, that's what the universal background check does. They have, when they originally put that out, they tried to mandate that and say, okay, every transfer of a firearm. Well, people got a little upset about that because if you're a parent and you want to give your son a firearm for his birthday, for graduation, whatever, you'd have to go through a background check. So they changed the wording, and now they say, oh, well, those certain situations won't. And you can loan a gun to your buddy as long as you're hunting with him, or as long as you're with him, or as long as you're on the same range with him. Otherwise, you have to do the transfer. That's why I oppose universal background checks. Now, we are going to take a little break. So take a look at this, and we'll be right back after this. You're watching America in Danger. Stay tuned.
It's our once-a-year incredible warehouse sale.
And you can't miss it.
From traditional to modern, we have the best home furnishings at 60 to 90% off. Thousands of lamps, decorative accessories, and chandeliers. An incredible selection of designer furniture, all conveniently located off I-95. Transform your home this year and save big.
You know where to find us. 218 North Church Street, downtown Rocky Mount.
comfort, joy, hope, and peace. Few songs in our lives have the power of hymns. Now you can bring this inspirational music into your home and life every day with 50 Most Loved Hymns, a new 2-CD collection. 50 magnificent hymns, just as you remember them. 50 Most Loved Hymns, a timeless collection for all ages on 2 CDs for only $21.98 plus $5.95 shipping and handling. Call now or order online.
All right, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned to America in Danger. I'm Robert Crescione. You know, I was talking about some gun control measures being attempting to be put in place by President Biden through executive order. Now, President Biden indicated what he thinks of the Constitution in this case by his statement that, well, no amendment is absolute. Well, I have to differ with him. You know, the amendments were added to the Constitution not to limit you and I. They were added to the Constitution to limit government. Now, when he says, oh, none of these amendments are absolute, well, I think the Second Amendment is pretty sound in being simply absolute. You know, now, we have allowed government to encroach on that amendment over the years, and that's how that's done. That's how government does. Government is very insidious, and it does things incrementally. A little here, a little there. You know, if we look at the 16th Amendment, well, that was income tax, and initially they promised that it would only be 3% or so, or never go above 3%. Well, now we have the president proclaiming that corporate taxes should be much higher, should be 28%. And his excuse is, well, they were 36 at one time, so 28 is a good number. Well, let me tell you something. Government talks about investment in infrastructure, especially right now with the nearly $3 trillion bill that they're trying to pass. They talk about investment in infrastructure. I hate when politicians use the phrase investment, because it's not investment. What they're spending is simply spending. Now, is there some benefit to it? Yeah, there is. People benefit from it. But it's not investment. There's no return on that, so to speak, for you and I. Possibly for government and increasing tax bases and what have you, but they present it as if we're the beneficiaries solely, and we are not. So they pass this down to you and me as if it's some gift from on high. Well, it's not. Don't believe it. Taxes are money taken out of the economy. So when government says, oh, they're going to invest in green energy, well, what they're saying is that they're going to tax you and me so that they can give that money to someone else. That's taxes. That's what taxes are. Taxes are confiscated wealth of individuals. And they keep saying, well, corporations need to pay their fair share. Well, corporations pay a tremendous amount that ultimately goes to taxes. You know, I'm really burned out on all this woke attitude that, you know, the rich and the productive have to pay more, have to pay their fair share. Well, you know what? We do. And the rich, what they call the rich, well, their money is not buried in the backyard. Their money is out in the economy working. It provides loans. It provides working capital. So when people talk about the resentment, or when these woke individuals talk with resentment about people who have earned and worked and gained and prospered. It's just jealousy. That's all it is. Now, talking about government, I want to run this little slideshow, and I'm going to narrate over it. But I want to talk about this, and I think it's good because people are visual. Most people are visual. When they see something and kind of read it for themselves, even when there's a narrator speaking, it sticks a little bit more. It sticks a little better. So I'm going to run this, and I'll walk you through these slides. So if Lee, if you'll cut to the slides there. All right. We're going to talk about government lies and deceptions. Throughout history, all governments, and I do mean all, have engaged in campaigns of lies, deceptions, misinformation, and propaganda. All of them have. There's not a single government that doesn't. Now, our own government has a long history of doing this. Now, let me say something before we go any farther. I'm not anti-government. That's not why I'm running this. I believe that we need a strong government, but we need a limited government, and that government needs to be under the microscope constantly. All right, in 1932, Tuskegee, Alabama, there was a syphilis study. Over 200 people, and I think it was close to 400 people, I think it was right around 399, were denied treatment in order to study the progression of the disease. Now, the worst part about it is they believed they were receiving treatment. Now, in 1950, there was an operation called Operation Sea Spray. Interesting operation because it took place in the streets of San Francisco. There was a TV series, I believe, called The Streets of San Francisco, if I remember correctly, with Michael Douglas, I believe, was in it. Now, in 1950, Operation Sea Spray, the government sprayed 6 different biological agents in the streets of San Francisco. Many were killed, and many were injured from the resulting infections. The intent? To determine the rate of spread in coastal cities. Now, the residents were never notified. They didn't know what was going on. In 1955, there was Operation Big Buzz. That sounds harmless enough. Well, the government released malaria-carrying mosquitoes into the parks in Georgia. Reason? To determine how fast the disease spreads when introduced like that. Again, they didn't inform anyone what they were doing. Now, in 1960, there were CIA operations, and in those operations, they were conducting mind control projects on unsuspecting individuals. Now, they did that for nearly 2 decades. 2 decades they did that. The intent to learn how to control people. And believe me, they kept detailed records on that. Now, in 1960, there was Operation Mockingbird. Operation Mockingbird was a CIA initiative to infiltrate the media in order to control public opinion. Very interesting. The former president of CBS News stated this. He said, "Our job is to give people not what they want, but what we decide they ought to have." In 1960, even more MK Ultra projects. So these are all sub-projects of the MK Ultra program. The United States government gave thousands of soldiers and civilians LSD without their knowledge or consent. Intent? To determine if LSD could be used as a weapon to disable enemy soldiers. 1964, the second Tonkin Gulf incident. Now, this is the incident that really drew us into Vietnam. And I think we all know how many people died in Vietnam and how many people were scarred for life when they got back. The U.S. government alleged a second attack on American vessels took place in the Tonkin Gulf, which is off the coast of Vietnam. Declassified documents. Now, these are declassified documents, so this is the government providing their information to us. They're taking the veil off. The declassified documents revealed it never happened. The intent? To sway public opinion to accept further involvement in the Vietnam conflict. 1990 and 91, there was a measles vaccine experiment. Vaccines, interesting. The CDC, now this is the CDC, mind you, they went over to third world countries, and a lot of them in Africa, the Middle East, areas like that, and they injected children, infants now, with an experimental vaccine, all without parental knowledge or consent. Further testing in Los Angeles resulted in an alarming death rate. We don't know how many children died in the third world countries, but we do know that in Los Angeles there was a high death rate among infants. They terminated it, but their intent was to determine if natural antibodies could be replaced with a vaccine. That's the CDC. That's the same CDC that has changed its mind and changed its tune numerous times throughout this COVID scenario. Now, from 2000 on, the NSA, the FISA courts have been abused. The NSA has been spying and data collection has been going on, and they've been listening to everything, which actually the NSA has access to every communication in the United States and abroad. That's how sophisticated their eavesdropping is. Now, under the guise of fighting terrorism, they eavesdropped and listened. The secret courts were created, which a lot of people don't even know there are secret courts that allow these FISA search warrants. Mass data has been collected. And violations of the Fourth Amendment are rampant. So, you know, the NSA has access to all forms of communication, so I suggest you be careful what you say on the phone, especially your cell phone. Now, in 2003, we all remember this one, don't we? The weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction. The pretext for the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and it resulted in a perpetual conflict over the last 17 years. All of that started as a quest for weapons of mass destruction. Sadly, none were ever found. With all the documents declassified, with all the documentation, with the proven lies and deception by the government, can we actually accept anything at face value? I don't think so. I think we need to take everything that we're told with a grain of salt. I think that we need to do our own investigating. We need to look into things. We need to be aware. We need to be on our toes. And with that, we're going to take a little break. I'm Robert Crescione. You're watching America in Danger. We'll be right back.
our once-a-year incredible warehouse sale.
And you can't miss it.
From traditional to modern, we have the best home furnishings at 60 to 90% off. Thousands of lamps, decorative accessories, and chandeliers. An incredible selection of designer furniture, all conveniently located off I-95. Transform your home this year and save big.
You know where to find us. 218 North Church Street, downtown Rocky Mount.
Comfort, joy, hope, and peace. Few songs in our lives have the power of hymns. Now you can bring this inspirational music into your home and life every day with 50 Most Loved Hymns, a new 2-CD collection. 50 magnificent hymns, just as you remember them. "50 Most Loved Hymns," a timeless collection for all ages on 2 CDs for only $21.98 plus $5.95 shipping and handling. Call now or order online.
We're back. I'm Robert Crescione. You're watching America in Danger. We've been talking about some government deception and lies. I think we all need to be aware that very often what we're told is not 100% factual and not the truth. And that's why we have to be on guard. We have to look into it ourselves. We can't take the word of the media. We can't take the word of the government. I'm not telling you to believe in conspiracy theory, because typically the conspiracy theory as we know it leads you down a rabbit hole. It typically takes you off, I know that the QAnon thing was real big there for a while, and I have to believe that the QAnon was simply a diversion to sap the energy of individuals who pursued that, who followed that, who hung on every word of that, who planned for those things to come to pass, rather than educating themselves, because that's what we need to do. We need to educate ourselves in all of this. And you know, I heard President Biden the other day, and he came on and he said that Georgia has just passed a law and it's the equivalent of Jim Crow on steroids. Oh, it's horrible, it's Jim Crow on steroids. Well, being a curious type that I am, and not being willing to listen to the networks and the government and the president, I went and downloaded the bill. This is the Georgia Election Integrity Act of 2021. Now, it's 98 pages. So I sat down and proceeded to read it through. And as I read it, I made a list of everything that the bill did. 51 items. Now, a few of the items I lumped in as one because they're administrative and they're so close, and it's tweaking certain procedures and what have you. Now, out of the 51 things, out of the 98 pages that I read, which I don't think the MLB read, I don't think Coca-Cola read, I don't think Delta Airlines read. I'm sorry, I know those CEOs can read, And all they have to do is get one of their clerks to download this, because you can go to the Georgia website, the Georgia General Assembly website, and you can download the legislation, which is what I did, and I read it. Now, I'm not going to go through this list of 51 things, because a lot of these are just administrative things and just things that they need to tweak a little bit. A lot of these are what happens in an emergency situation similar to what we just went through with the election. It solidifies some procedures to eliminate some of the more questionable things that happened. I don't see a problem with that. They're saying, oh, well, it requires identification and that adversely affects certain ethnicities and it's targeting, it's voter suppression. Well, I'm sorry, but all it asks is that when you mail in a ballot, you have some identifying information on there so that that ballot can be verified to be from you. Now, I don't know about you, but I personally want that, because I want them to know, this is my ballot, count it. Now, if one ballot goes in as fraudulent, then that cancels your vote or my vote, but it cancels a vote. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all. They preach that every vote counts. Well, if it does, then we need to be on our toes to prevent fraudulent voting. Now, the pundits will tell you, oh, there's no fraud out there. The little bit of fraud there is, it's just minor. Well, the Texas Attorney General has prosecuted 520, I believe, cases, or is prosecuting 520 cases from the most recent election. Prior to that, from 2005 until now, there were only 580 cases ever prosecuted over 15 years. Now, just this year, there are almost 600 cases. Now, the Georgia law, I think, in my opinion, it only slightly, and I do mean ever so slightly, discourages voter fraud. Now, I'm not talking about wholesale voter fraud where they back a truckload of false ballots in. I'm talking about individuals who go out or who send out absentee ballots without them being asked for. And that's another thing that this law does. This law requires that you, if you want to vote absentee ballot, you must request it. No one can request it for you. You request it, and they'll send it to you. Now, that's as it should be, because if they start sending out absentee ballots willy-nilly to the whole neighborhood, and half the neighborhood says, well, I'm going to go down and vote in person, then that half, all those absentee ballots are just floating around out there. And there's some room for some shenanigans there. So we don't want that. If you want to vote absentee, great. Ask for a ballot. Simple as that. You can call them. You can. It's very easy. You can call them, give them your information, they'll send you one. You can fill out an application, send it in. Now, the problem is where people shotgunned out these absentee ballots and then went out and harvested ballots. Now, I know for a fact that people do that. People will go to nursing homes and fill out a ballot for an individual who is not able to even be aware of what day it is, and they'll make their mark on it, and they'll send it in with the vote of the person harvesting that ballot. Now, that should be grossly illegal. That should be a major violation. If you go out and solicit someone's ballot, you should be in jail. I'm sorry. That's just the way I feel. I do not agree with that. So the Georgia bill is not Jim Crow on steroids. That's the most idiotic thing I've heard. The media say, and it's probably not the most idiotic thing I've ever heard the president say, but it's right on up there. I'd say it's in the top 10 anyway. But I suggest you get the bill. If you think it's Jim Crow on steroids, you know what? Call me. I'll mail this to you if you don't want to download it. I'll mail you this version of it right here, complete with notes and annotations. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I think we'll talk about some things that are going on right now. And I heard one just before I came here, so I grabbed that article right quick because it really is something that we all need to be aware of. And we all need to understand this perspective. Senator Manchin from West Virginia, he's a Democrat, and some people call him a moderate. I find it hard to call any Democrat a moderate these days, but anyway, some people do. But what he said, and this is what caught my eye, he said the Capitol riot changed him. So when I saw that headline, I said, oh, I got to read this because this is going to be rich. Well, I was pleasantly surprised because he said it has compelled him to work harder to bring different lawmakers together. And he went on to say this. He said, January 6th changed me, and I was very clear with everyone. I never thought in my life that our form of government would be attacked. And I'm paraphrasing a little of that. At the seat of government, which is Washington, D.C. And he went on to say this, and this is the most important part of what he said. He said that he could not believe that further radical measures by Congress were what was needed in a time when half the population is willing to fight the other half. And that kind of struck me because what he's saying is that we are on the verge of a civil war. That's his attitude. He believes that we are to that point, and that more radical behavior in Congress, more steamrolling of the Democrats, more pushing things through that we know are not good for this country. He said that's not the answer. Now he's come out, he has, and Kristen Sinema have come out and said that they don't think getting rid of the filibuster is a good thing. Now if you don't understand what the filibuster is, the filibuster provides a required vote of 60 in the Senate to pass certain legislation. That's a good thing. That's a significant margin of majority. I think that's a good thing. I personally believe that every piece of legislation that passes from the House or the Senate should receive a supermajority vote, supermajority approval. I think that passing a bill in the Senate with 51 votes is atrocious. It is absolutely atrocious. But anyway, it'll be interesting to watch Senator Manchin and Sinema and see what they do when it comes up, because the Democrats are going to try and abolish the filibuster. They want to get rid of it because they want to push through all this Green New Deal and all these ridiculous pieces of legislation that are going to bankrupt this country. So it'll be interesting to see what he has to say. Now, on the presidential level again, President Biden wants to raise taxes. Now, the Democrats are planning to raise taxes because all of this spending requires taxes to go up. There's no way it can't. And if you think your taxes are not going to go up because of the lies that they tell us, oh, we're only going to tax the rich, we're only going to tax corporations, well, my friend, I'm sorry, but there's a bridge somewhere out in Arizona that someone wants to sell you. Because I guarantee taxes will go up, the cost of living will go up, inflation will skyrocket. And yes, even though the Wall Street crowd, the Federal Reserve crowd, keep the indices that indicate a good economy, they keep those strong on Wall Street by playing games. They manipulate the numbers. But the reality is what it costs you every week in fuel, in groceries, and utilities, those are the real economic indicators. And when those start going up, it doesn't matter what Wall Street or anyone else says. All right, we're going to take a little break, and after that, we'll come back and talk about a few more things that are in the news. I'm Robert Crescione. You're watching America in Danger. Stay tuned.
It's our once-a-year incredible warehouse sale.
And you can't miss it.
From traditional to modern, we have the best home furnishings at 60 to 90% off. Thousands of lamps, decorative accessories, and chandeliers. An incredible selection of designer furniture, all conveniently located off I-95. Transform your home this year and save big.
You know where to find us. 218 North Church Street, downtown Rocky Mount.
Comfort, joy, hope, and peace. Few songs in our lives have the power of hymns. Now you can bring this inspirational music into your home and life every day with 50 Most Loved Hymns, a new 2-CD collection. 50 magnificent hymns, just as you remember them. "50 Most Loved Hymns," a timeless collection for all ages on 2 CDs for only $21.98 plus $5.95 shipping and handling. Call now or order online.
We're back. Thanks for staying tuned to America in Danger. I'm Robert Crescione. Now, we've been talking about some things in the news today and how there are actually a few Democrat senators who think that the radical agenda being pushed in Washington is a little bit much. Just a little bit much. Well, I tend to agree with them. You know, we have government weighing in on things, the president weighing in on things, the president weighing in on this Georgia legislation. Now, that's absolutely outrageous when your president attacks one of his own states because the people in that state are doing what they think is right. That's a sad day in this country. That's a sad day. Now, Stacey Abrams, if you remember Stacey Abrams, the wannabe governor of Georgia who lost and refused to concede, well, she came out against the Georgia Election Integrity Act, rather, excuse me. And she's changed her tune now because she realizes it has cost her state dearly with the woke corporations pulling out, with the pressure from the woke corporations, with the pressure to boycott Georgia because they're passing bills that are Jim Crow on steroids. Well, remember, I read the bill. It's not. If you want a copy, go download it or call me. I'll send you mine. Now, Apple, and I'm sure a lot of you out there are very fond of Apple products, Apple phones, Apple smartwatch, Apple phones, Apple computers. Apple phones. Everyone is all the rage over Apple. Well, if you remember a few years back, there were some terrorists who happened to be customers of Apple, had iPhone and Apple computers, and they went in and murdered some people at a birthday party. Well, the government asked Apple to help them hack into their phones to get more information on whether they operated alone, whether it was part of a terrorist cell, whether it was part of a large organization. And Apple flat out said, no way, Jose. Now, they did so under the guise of, well, we can't do that. We've got to protect the privacy of all our subscribers and users. Now, they got away with that, but here we are, fast forward a few years, and introduced the COVID crisis. And Apple now says that they are coming out with a COVID-19 vaccine travel passport app to have on your phone. So much for individual privacy. My, how they changed their tune when it furthers the agenda they support. Yeah, I'm not real wild about that. As far as I'm concerned, a vaccine passport, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. That is just a violation, an unnecessary violation. Now, Hunter Biden's in the news again because he came out and he wrote a book. You would wonder why he would write a book at this point in time when his father is under such scrutiny by half of Americans. Well, he wrote this book and has done some interviews and what have you. Now, during his interview, he said that the Biden name was like gold to Ukraine's Burisma. Now, we all remember Burisma is a company that put him on the board of directors, even though he had no experience whatsoever in oil or gas. But he said his name was like gold. So that, to me, indicates some unethical behavior. And indicates to me that, yes, they bought him for access to Papa Joe, the big guy. Now, what this does is this diverts all of the attention to Hunter's dealings with China. Because remember, China funded him with some sort of hedge fund deal to the tune of $1 billion. Now, Hunter was definitely not known as a hedge fund guru. He couldn't even keep up with his own laptop or his own firearm. So, you know, it's just hard to believe that those things happen without some pay for play. And yet the media ignores all of that, and they go after Governor DeSantis and the Publix deal, knowing that it wasn't DeSantis who made the final decision on that. That's the media and their agenda, their woke agenda. Now, you know, we've talked about the the voter integrity bill. Well, the latest polls show that there is overwhelming support for voter ID. Overwhelming support. I think most people have no problem with it. They've clearly demonstrated, and it's been proven, that every state that's implemented voter ID, voter turnout has increased Now, that's not what we're told. We're told that, oh, this suppresses the vote. This suppresses the vote. But every state that implemented voter ID, election turnout has increased. Now, why isn't the media covering that? Why aren't they telling that story? Well, they're not telling that story for the same reason that they won't tell you the truth in many issues, because it doesn't further their agenda. It doesn't support their agenda. You got to remember that. It's an agenda, and contrary to some of the conspiracy theorists out there, it's not half a dozen men meeting in a dark room smoking cigars, deciding what's done. This is an agenda. It's a movement. It's broad. A lot of people that participate in this, a lot of people that push this, don't even know why they're pushing it. They just join in. That's the thing. If you're in an auditorium and you stand up and make a stand, there are going to be certain people that join in with you, that support you. And that's the way this agenda is. There's not necessarily someone pulling every string, but there are people pulling enough strings to make things happen. They use incidents. They further incidents. You can believe that media personnel are put in place to further this agenda. Just like the president of CBS, who said, it's not our job to give people what they want. It's our job to give them what we think they need. That's the philosophy of the media, and the media is well used by the CIA, by the government, by the politicians, by everyone pushing this agenda. Now, next week, we're going to talk about the North Carolina General Assembly a little bit, because you need to understand how the General Assembly works, who your representatives are. It's up to us as voters to educate ourselves on these things, to look at what's being done. And I've got one little quick video. It's about a minute. That's about all I've got left. So, Lee, if you'll run that one video, take a look at this, because we can resist.
Out. I don't want to hear anything. Out of this property immediately. I don't want to hear a word. Out. Out. Out of this property immediately until you come back with a warrant. Out. Do you understand English? Get out of this property. Go. So go. Go. And don't come back without a warrant. Out, Nazi. Out. Out. You understand? Nazis are not welcome here. Out. And don't come back without a warrant. Do not come back without a warrant. You understand that? You're not welcome here. Nazis are not welcome here. Can you imagine those psychopaths? Passover, the holiest Christian festival in a year, and they're coming to intimidate Christians during the holiest festival? Unbelievable. What is wrong with those sick psychopaths? It's beyond me.
All right. Hate I ran out of time on that, but that was a Canadian minister who kicked the police out when they came to enforce COVID mandates without a warrant. Resistance is real. I'm Robert Crescione. Tune in next week for more America in Danger. Thanks for watching.